Everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Today I'm going to teach you guys all about how to overlap your letters in graffiti, and we're going to make this as easy as humanly possible. We're going to break down the science of how overlapping works by taking a look at 3 different pieces of graffiti that increase in complexity. If you want more information on this topic, I wrote a blog about it down in the description below. If you want to go ahead and check that out, you can. But without further ado, let's hop right into it with this facts piece. Now, there's 2 different problems we oftentimes see in newer graffiti artists when they overlap their letters. The first problem is they take one huge amount of one letter and smack it right on top of another letter. This obviously obscures letter structure because the viewer can't see what's happening underneath this huge section that layers on top of the other letter. The other issue we see is sometimes people will take a lot of smaller overlaps, but they'll do too many of them. And this ends up resulting in the letter that's on the bottom having too high of a percentage of itself being covered up. It's almost hidden behind something and you can't quite see it, similar to my face right here. So when we look at this facts piece right here, we see overlaps done really well. What we get an example of is how the letter P, this top section, the bowl, is overlapping this part of the H. It's also very important to show a little sliver of positive space of the letter that's getting covered. This allows us, in order to be able to see all of this structure right here that develops the letter's anatomy. And that's really important. We don't want to lose this section here. If we went ahead and covered that section up, we suddenly detach this top portion of the H from the bottom portion. And as a result, we're missing all of this right here. And that decreases the amount of letter structure that the H has. We want to avoid this at all costs. And that's why we go ahead and we keep a little sliver of positive space. That way we can see that letter structure. But there's something else at work here. Notice how when the P comes in contact with the H again in the stem area, instead of overlapping, this time they join together. With that said though, the H could have overlapped right here and it wouldn't have been much of an issue because of how insignificant that overlap is. Notice once again though, the H does overlap right here in this top section, even if only just slightly. This helps to keep the established section right there of the P's structure, allowing us to see this part of the bowl connect to this part of the bowl. That area is important. Being able to see where one thing connects to another is something that we really want to keep an eye on when we're overlapping letters. Oftentimes when a graffiti artist makes a mistake with overlaps, it's because of something along these lines. Another great rule of thumb in order to keep in mind is to alternate your overlaps. Take a look at the T and the S combo right over here. Over here you'll see that both letters overlap one another. The T starts off on the top section right there, but we don't want the T to overlap again on the S, otherwise suddenly now we're losing letter structure both on the top and the bottom if we do that. So instead, what do? Since the T already had its turn, give the S a turn to overlap right here on the bottom. Keep in mind, the T already lost a little bit of structure when it got overlapped by the A, so for that reason, you go ahead and add a little bit of an area that connects and conjoins the T to the S, and you don't lose nearly as much structure. That's a great way to go about it. Alternating overlaps is very, very powerful for maintaining your letter structure. So let's move into a little bit more of a difficult example here with none other than Bates, an amazing graffiti artist. I know a lot of you guys love him, as do I, and check out how he overlaps. He does the exact thing we just taught about alternating what goes over what. So here the B gets gone over by the A just a little bit, just a hair, not too much, but then the B has its turn and goes over the A instead. Then we see a bit of a change of pace. The A goes over the T quite a bit. We have a pretty decent amount of the T getting covered up here, but then what does the T do? The T fights back and gets its own letter structure and maintains its own letter structure by overlapping the E. This is necessary because had the T gone ahead and gotten overlapped again by the E, then look at all the structure we'd be missing out on. Look at how the T's structure just disappears from existence. Suddenly now, we're missing out on all of this section right here. That's a significant portion of the letter. With that, you can see how a bunch of smaller overlaps can add up in order to decrease the amount of structure for a specific letter. So we want to avoid that as well. Now for our most advanced example in this video. I hold Saber to really high regard for this reason, because he does so many fundamental things flawlessly. The guy is he's just a phenomenal graffiti artist, and his work speaks for itself. Whenever you have a graffiti artist who also has fine art knowledge such as Saber, you're in good hands. You're looking at some really good sound work. And Saber is somebody who uses overlaps to a really effective degree because his letters run on a little bit of a thin side, but he still is able to maintain the structure of each one of his letters. So let's kind of look at how he does this. We'll not only see him using a combination of alternating the overlaps, but we'll also see him increase the amount of negative space and then put letters structure within that negative space, and not only in order to fill that space, but to also avoid distorting letter structures. For this, we're going to use the B and the E as an example here. Both of these letters have a lot of negative space, and that allows for other parts of other letters in order to travel through this negative space without having their letter structure obscured, giving them the opportunity to develop a lot of structure. So when we see the B come down and extend far in this direction, while sure it gets overlapped twice by the E in those areas, it still has all of this in order to build its structure with. If the B was much shorter, let's say for example, the B only came down to about here, and the E still overlapped in this area right there, well then we'd be losing a lot of the letter B's structure, and we don't really want that. So giving your letters the room to spread and the room to kind of reach out and develop their structure not only gives them time to develop that structure, but allows for more area to get overlapped. Now the trick here is exactly kind of what we talked about in the beginning of the video, where if you overlap too high of a percentage of a letter, well then suddenly the letter begins to look as if it's hiding. But because you enlarged the letters, you included more negative space, you allowed the letter time to develop its structure. Not only that, you've increased the amount of area the letter encompasses, which then lets other letters overlap a higher percentage without distorting the letter underneath them. But dudes, that pretty much wraps up today's video. If you want more examples about this topic and a little bit of a deeper dive, then check out the description down below where I wrote an entire article about it. Also, while you're down there, have a look at the books we published. They're an amazing resource for information about graffiti. Haver actually just did, he's a good friend of mine, he just did a piece that came out phenomenally, and he said it was only possible with the teachings from the book, which I'm not gonna lie, put a huge smile on my face. So huge shout out to him. And of course, if you want more information about graffiti, check out the best how to do graffiti tutorials right up here with even more graffiti content right down here.